Hello, this is Corey. Before we get started, I want to share with you a new thing I'm doing for the Cincinnati business leaders. In January of this year, I launched the Prioritize Leader Academy and brought together 8 different business leaders and owners. And we meet once a month as well as have coaching in between our different sessions. So basically, it's a mastermind, but we've added strong content, incorporated faith into the piece. And so it has gone so well that in October, we are launching our second cohort. So if you are a business leader or a business owner and you are looking for community, you are looking for coaching, you are looking for additional content to help push you forward, then reach out. Love to give you more information on what this looks like. You can email me at corey@corey.mcarlson.com or go ahead and give me a call, 720-301-8377. And this is for any Cincinnati business owner or leader who is looking to grow over this next 12-month period. Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. Today's episode, David Falk, is packed with wisdom. If you don't know David Falk, you've probably eaten at one of his restaurants. I know in Cincinnati, 3 of my favorite restaurants are his. Soda, Boca, and Nada. So fun to experience each of them. And so he has this demand of excellence at the office or in the restaurants. And so I want to talk about how does he dial it down at home so he's not just so high control. And so we have a great discussion there because selfishly, I continue to figure out, hey, how do I dial down my day job of coaching and leading every day to being a good husband and good father? So a good discussion there. We have a good discussion around ambition because as he has been driven to be successful and now there are multiple cities, hundreds of employees. So how has he balanced that ambition? And then a very cool story about he had headlights coming down towards him and just felt a call from God to start handing over his story for a greater story. And then we talk about COVID, how it hit the restaurant industry, how they navigated through it. It is packed with good stuff. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. On to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. Today I'm joined by David Falk, who is owner and founder of the Boca Restaurant Group. And if you have ever been to Cincinnati, my 3 favorite restaurants, Boca, Soda, and Nada. They are now in 5 different cities, 4 states. So he is just doing very well on the work front. And then at home, he has 3 kids. One was just born 2 weeks ago, as well as just a man that is just going after excellence, which we will talk about throughout this podcast. And so, David, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, to start off, what is that key trait to win at work and win at home?
The first word that comes to mind, there's probably better words, but the first word is pace. A little backstory. I was like, I'm a chef, right? So obviously, and I was not blessed with my bride's metabolism. Okay. So, I'm one of these guys, it's very easy for me to put on weight and it's very hard to lose it. And right when we were married and we were having our first daughter, I was the heaviest I'd been. And one of my friends, I met this guy in Israel, actually on a trip over there. Long story short, became one of my best friends. And he's a runner. He's a P&G-er runner, and he's like, I'm going to get you running. I'm like, dude, I'm a bowling ball with legs. Like that, my body was not great to run. But nonetheless, if you know this guy, he's pretty persuasive. And lo and behold, he said, what's your goal weight? I was like 213, 215, somewhere around there. Honestly, like my goal, like 189, but I'll never get there. And he's like, well, I challenge you to get there through the pregnancy. And so long and the short of it is, I just worked this plan for 6 months and I hit it 3 days before Frankie, my oldest, was born. But, it's really just pace, right? Because, and I have many, many years of doing it the wrong way where, I had no pace. And so what I would do, and I'm a sprinter by nature, definitely not a marathon runner. And I feel like that's something that, that's something that the Lord is doing in me in general. And so I would sprint at work, right? And then I would crash land into the weekend. And with my time off with my wife, you give work your best and, your family gets the rest kind of deal. It's like, well, that's not good. So it was just more of a pace thing. So it's like, what is the pace? And obviously I would say pace and humility, right? So it's the humility to know that it's not all about you at work. And it's definitely, you can talk to my wife, it definitely ain't all about me at home. It's really taking responsibility for it, right? So we're called, at least I believe we're called, as a husband, I'm called to lead my family. And that's like, I need to lead both sides of it, right? And my family's way more important than my company is. And it's taken me a long time to kind of get there. And, there's a lot going on. There's a pandemic. I own a restaurant group, everything else, being in the restaurant business without a pandemic tough enough. And so when we had our third, I told people I treated it like a restaurant opening. I mean, I've got staff galore. I brought resources around my wife, and it's honestly been magical. So, and we're blessed to have great amazing grandmas that want to help out and aunts that want to help out. And, and we got babysitters lined up so that it's not just you're crash landing into this total chaos.
Yeah, some good ones there, David. You mentioned leveraging, basically a financial capital, a framework that you're familiar with using the coaching practices, those 5 capitals: spiritual, then relational, then physical, intellectual, and financial. And how can we leverage those lower capitals, such as financial, to pay people to free us up with time, whether it's to pursue purpose, whether it's to be more intentional with our family?
It's also relational, right? Like, who do you know? And if you're in if you got a great, community, or you got some people, like, who can you lean on? I would get asked to do these charity dinners and Solomon auction. And whenever these dinners would come up, I would get there and I'm exhausted. It's my one day off. It's like me and one other dude. And we're feeding 8 people, and we got to cook, and then we got to clean the house up and everything. And I'm like, this sucks. So I finally sat there and I said, okay, when somebody asked me, I said, I'm only doing it if you will agree to pay for 1 staff member for every guest that you have. So if I'm cooking for 8 people, you're paying for 8 staff members to come. And what I realized, but they're like, sure, yeah, fine, whatever. Well, I would have my staff go in there. They loved it. They're getting extra cash. And I would just roll in like for 30 minutes before it. I'd hang out, do my song and dance. I get the heck out of there. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, if you bring enough hands around something, all of a sudden something that is World War III becomes like, it's actually the most enjoyable kind of birth. And I've had a lot of sweet time with my 2 older kids, because especially the middle one, who's a mama's girl, she was like, oh, mama. And we were like, man, when this baby pops out, she's going to be freaking. And so I love it, because she's now all about dada.
You talk about the who. I think that's a great concept. Just the thing, you've heard the phrase for who, not how. So how can, I think you and I may be wired the same, where it's like, I can just get it done. I'll go do it myself, do it my way. And so a lot of times my default is, how will I get this done? And over the years, really transitioned to who can help get this done.
When I was younger, it was like I just jumped into doing. And now it's all about who. That's Boca is going to be 20 years coming up, but my company's going to be 20 years. And I would tell you, the first 20 years, our product was the food, the restaurants, the design, the experience. And it sounds like cheesy, cliche, but it's just true, is that for me, the vision that I feel like we have is that for the next 20 years, our product is going to be our team. It's our staff.
And they're attracted to purpose and to culture.
Yeah.
So if you're building something other than just putting good food on the table, but instead it's about excellence, it's about just building that overall experience like you do so well, they're in for that.
Yeah.
And so you're probably attracting a lot of the good talent because it's all about purpose and people for them.
Yeah. And our purpose is very simple. It's blowing people away. And so we do, we give people carte blanche in our staff and our organization, whatever ideas they have to blow people away. And they can be tear jerkers to just funny and humorous and everything in between. And it is like, I kind of forget, obviously I started the company, so it's 20 years in. And so with that, and that's that purpose that, we find that people are drawn to. Because I always say in our business, there's only 2 types of people in this industry. And maybe life, I don't know. I can't speak that. I can speak to the restaurant industry. I'm not that smart. But in our industry, there's people that have the spirit, what I call the mercenary spirit. And you see this in servers all the time. And they sit there and, mercenary spirit, all they care about is getting as much money out of your wallet into theirs as possible. And then you have people with spirit of hospitality, right? And that's like my mom. Like, she just can't help herself. She'd give literally the shirt off her back to anybody. And the problem is that mercenary spirit looks a lot like the spirit of hospitality if you don't know where to look. But we're human beings, are pretty intuitive. And you can just tell when a server's taking care of you, like, they're smiling, they remember your drink, but they don't really care about you. And to me, the spirit of hospitality is where the magic happens. Now, it's a challenge because you have to remind people, like, we actually have to make money, because the challenge in our business is that you really are linked to hospitality. Hospitality is not directly linked to capitalism and financial profit. I always make the case that, Corey, if I go over to your house and you invite us over for dinner and we have this amazing meal, and then at the end of it, you hand me a check, right? Probably going to be a little offended or think that's pretty damn odd, right? When we train people, we tell them that, hey, train them like they're out. I always say, or the worst moment for us in any dining experience is when we drop the check, because that's where we have to break character.
And just so you know, that's not only in the restaurant industry. There's a great book called Give and Take. Adam Grant wrote it. And it's just the idea that in all different industries, there are givers, those that have that hospitality spirit you're talking about, where they're giving referrals, they're giving tips, connecting people to each other, whatever it may be. And then there's takers. They are just out for the PO. They're just out for, what's in it for them. And it's a great book just showing that, hey, sometimes takers actually take off faster in their careers, but then they'll hit a taker ceiling. But givers, it's a little slower burn. And then all of a sudden it could be a hockey stick. And, you mentioned the mercenaries. I think they blow their cover when they're kind of okay. And then at the very end, they give you that bill. It is over the top, man. Thank you so much for being here and come back again. It's like, what? I have not seen your smile all the time.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, whenever we dine in your 3 restaurants, I've only been to the Cincinnati ones, and I'm sure it's the exact same everywhere. But man, it is consistent from the moment you sit down to when you leave. And that blow people away, as you call on the team, BPA, it works.
There's 3 steps to any great BPA. If you think about anybody that's ever blown you away, ever did anything for you, you'll find these 3 things. Step 1 is aggressive listening. Like, you've got to listen. That was actually going to be the other thing I thought of when you said balancing work and home, is be a great listener, which I'm not great at, but that would be something that I would definitely put up there for me to aspire to. My wife would definitely agree with that. But aggressive listening, step 1. Step 2 is an organic, creative idea that's designed to blow a person or a group of people away. It could be a BPA for one person or a group of people, but it's organic and it's creative. It happens right there when you're talking to them, whatever. And then the last one is flawless execution, right? And so make sure you execute on it so that it is a BPA. I always call this my wife. My wife's sometimes bad at the third. And if she gets you a present because she listened to you, she's got an organic, creative idea. And I'm sure everybody listening has somebody, or they are this person. My wife has never made it to Christmas, right, ever, without telling me what I was getting for Christmas. So do you want to know? Do you want to know what I got you? I'm so excited. But she just, we've had servers sit there where we have a BPA where somebody jokingly said, I couldn't decide if I was coming to Boca or going to White Castle. So we run out and get a whole bag of sliders, right? And the server comes up, guess what? We ran out to get you a whole bag of sliders. Like, no, you're ruining the BPA.
BPA, when I think of that, I think of excellence. When I've been in your restaurants, excellence. How do you lead at home where and even at work too, but where there's some grace, but yet you're going for excellence?
Yeah.
I know in my own parenting and running my own house, if I'm not careful, the kids doing their devotions, I want them talking about what is their vision for their life. I've tried to bring the excellence of my coaching program into the home, which backfires. And how have you found the ability to, and you're laughing as I even say that, as if it's still a work in progress. Yeah. So how does excellent look in your house?
So I too made that mistake, and I fell into I know how to lead. I mean, I lead my business all the time. Okay, I'm just going to lead at home like I do at work. And that means basically what I say goes. Man, that didn't go over well. I had a good buddy of mine, Steve Emanuel. He and I were on vacation, and he's been a great friend and kind of mentor. And I said, let's talk about, lead the family. I know how to lead and blah, blah. Like, basically what I was getting to was I wanted him to go to my wife and basically say, hey, you're doing this all wrong. You need to obey your husband kind of deal, thinking like, yeah. He just gets real quiet. One of his daughters came up and was like, Daddy. He's like, no, Daddy can't talk. Go sit down over there. And I was like, Oh, wow. And like, kind of gave a cue to his family, like, I need to have a conversation with this, young punk. And I was like, this, I felt like I just like walked in the principal's office. He goes, look, his take was, and I found this to be true, is like, yes, you're called to lead, but it's more like a shepherd than it is like a chef in a kitchen. And so a shepherd's job is to kind of lead the sheep into a pasture. You want to protect them, but you're kind of gently bringing them along and you want to get them there. And it shouldn't feel like they're getting whipped every day. And I was just like, oh. So, and I've been thinking a lot about when Jesus says, let your gentleness be evident to all. People would not tell you that, I've been known for my gentleness. However, my staff will tell you, and I think my wife would definitely say this too. My staff calls me Chef Light now. The ones that have been around for a long time with the new staff, they're like, oh, this chef, he's kind of like Chef Light now. He's not like the old school. And they tell horror stories about driving to work so stressed off they miss the exit, and then they're even more stressed out. I mean, there's all kinds of stories about back in the old days. So to me, it's one of the things that I think is just a great practice at work and at home and in life is to get alignment on expectations when there is no emotion. So if I can align on expectations with my wife, hey, this is the expectation, it's the expectation, right? And we have an expectation now that we're working on of trying to every Sunday, I'm cooking dinner and we're doing just a legit sit down dinner. Her expectation for me is when I'm off work, right? And that I'm going to take her on a date night once a week. And so just getting that out in front and it's the same thing with staff members. It's exactly the same thing, right? If I can get alignment on expectations, sitting here like, hey, are we cool with this? This is kind of what I'm thinking. And getting buy-in, right? Like I'm not dictating this. I'm just saying, hey, what do you think about this? Babe, what if we do this? Right. And yeah, okay, cool. Well, then now that's, we've kind of, said, and if it seems like it's overwhelming or, whatever, that's where I have to sit there and say, maybe this was too much. And always, just like in the restaurants, erring on the side of hospitality, I'm a big believer in erring on the side of grace. I don't always do that, but I would tell you, my wife would have told you early on the first 3 to 4 years of marriage, I was all truth and no grace. I'm still more truth than grace, I'm sure she would say, but I've definitely amped up the grace meter. And I think we all, people fall in different sides of that. Some people are all grace. I know people, especially in parenting, like they're all grace and no truth. And
that's why we have a lot of spoiled, entitled kids running
around. You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Just the visual of the shepherd, it's the rod and the staff. Yeah. It's a little bit of, curling them towards them, and then kind of the prodding, truth and grace, invitation and challenge. A lot of those similar tensions that we have talked about. Proverbs 13:24, where it says, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. And then it says in the ESV, I use the paper version still, in small footnote, it says, he who loves him disciplines him early. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And then last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much.
The thing that gets lost in this, I think, for a lot of young, like I got a buddy of mine who's about to have his first kid. He's like, man, we got to go to coffee or go on a run because I need to pick your brain, right? I'm like, dude, I will give you everything I have. Trust me, because I've made every mistake you can. But the thing that shocked me about it was that if you discipline your children early, you really don't have to deal with it a whole lot later. Like, it establishes the culture where it's like early. I mean, we can tell you the first time Frankie disobeyed us directly. I mean, Kate and I both remember it. And yes, we spank our kids. And I looked at my wife and I sat there, and in my head, I was like, man, this would be really good if Caitlin disciplined her. And sure enough, it's like she read my mind. She picked up Frankie. And sure enough, took her in the bathroom. We were on vacation, and she comes out crying, and she had apologized to Daddy. And she did. And we celebrated her and said, great job, way to repent. And like, literally, it just, there was like that maybe one other time. And then she just gets it. Like, we just don't, like, if you do it early, it saves so much pain down the road. Now, granted, our oldest is only 5. But I don't know. I mean, you hear about the terrible 2s and the 3s and the 4s, and we've just not had any of that. And now, number 2, our second child, Gigi, she is way more like me. But even she gets, I mean, and it's also amazing. It's not like we go around spanking our kids every day. I mean, it's a rarity that we have to. And it's only when they literally look you straight in the eye and they just totally disobey you. Like, it's a challenge. It's like, what are you going to do about it? But generally, it's just casting vision over your kids. Like, we just don't do this here. This isn't how the Falks. This isn't how the Falks operate. We don't do that in the Falk family. And little Gigi just sits there like, oh, and she's only 2, but she's just sitting here like, oh, it's amazing. That's the other thing, is I don't think people give kids enough credit for how smart they are. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't discipline your kid at that age. They're not that smart. I'm like, then you don't understand kids. Because I literally remember being 2.5, 3, and looking at my parents and being like, oh, my mom has all the control in the world. So I'm going to get her wrapped around my finger, and I'm going to get almost everything I want. And I told my brothers that, and they lost their mind. They're like, you got to be kidding me, because that's exactly what you did. I'm like, yeah, dude, I knew at 2, 3, that she's the one who ruled the roost,
Mm-hmm. Well, a little bit of how you guys parented is how we did as well, is just being, you make your yes be your yes, and your no be your no. Where, back to your kids being smart, or how kids are smart out there, if you say, stop it, or I'm going to take that iPad away. And if you don't take the iPad away, they know exactly that your yes does not mean yes. And so for us, we also spanked. And when we said no iPad, it was gone. I'm not a big fan of the, hey, 5 more minutes, no. And so some of those things, and you feel like a jerk at the beginning, but David, you made a comment about how the age of your kids. Fast forward, mine are 17, 13, and 9. And it's the truth and grace has paid off. Very, very grateful that Holly and I were on the same page with that.
Well, and I will say, there is nothing to me that's more critical to being able to execute whatever vision you have at home than you and your spouse being on the same page. Because that was the other thing in my family growing up, is my mom and my dad weren't. So I would want something. My dad was always basically right. Like, no, don't give that to him. My mom was like, yes, I mean, he should, and I would see them bickering at each other. And I just realized the power struggle and how to manipulate it. Because ultimately, I heard a podcast, or somebody said, if you want to know what determination looks like, it's a 13-year-old trying to get an iPhone, right? Like, they're like, okay, I'm going to go to mom. Mom says no. Then I'm going to go to dad. Dad says no. Then I'm going to go to grandma. Then I'm going to go to grandpa. Like, that is
about persistence.
That is like, you know what I mean? And kids are, so being on the same page, and I literally can watch mainly my oldest sit there and try to pit us against each other, because she asks mom something and mom will say no. And then she looks at me. I'm like, don't look at me. We're not playing this game,
They are at maybe opposite ends of a couple issues in the home. I think going back to what David said earlier of, hey, alignment and expectations when there's no emotion. When everyone's doing great in the house, that's the time to talk about, hey, can we talk about bedtime? Or can we talk about time on the iPad, or whatever it is, not in the thick of the moment.
And if you think it's going to be challenging, like a challenging thing, ask it as a question. What do you think about this? What's your take on this? As
good.
Opposed to, I think.
Yeah. David, part of my story is a moment where I've felt and heard from God, you need to hand over your small story for a greater story. Is there a moment in your life where the David way just wasn't working anymore, and you needed to hand over your story for a greater story?
To me, handing over your story to a greater story, basically handing over your story to God's story, right? But to me, it's like dying to yourself, right? So I don't know that yes, there's a pinnacle moment. I was 25 years old. always believed in God, was like raised Catholic. And I have a lot of grace for any young cooks or people in my organization or in our industry who are really arrogant and really talented, because we won't hire them and we'll get them out of our organization as quickly as possible. When everybody else kind of hates on them, I'm like, well, I kind of know that kid. That was me. And so my quick story is I was the most arrogant cook. And I was also pretty talented. And I was driving down the road, and there were headlights coming at me. It wasn't like in the same lane. It was just a car. It was at night. It was a car coming at me at the other lane. This voice in my head just says, if that car hit you head on and you met your maker, how would you feel? And it scared the you know what out of me. I mean, I was just like it, because I knew I was super arrogant. I was super talented. But I knew that I just simply couldn't take credit for my talent, because my story, very much like, almost like I call it the Saul to Paul conversion, right? Because I hated food as a kid. But I walked into the restaurant business when I was 15, followed my brothers, and I just fell in love. I'm like, this is home. But my hand shook, and so I couldn't pour coffee. I was pouring coffee over this elderly woman, and I was scared to death I was going to burn her. So I was like, I'm going to the kitchen. I told my dad that. My dad's like, dude, you actually have to like food to go to the kitchen. I'm like, no, I kind of am. And I got really into it. And then out of that just exploded this kind of unforeseen talent, and it literally felt like a kind of Saul to Paul conversion. Like, this is insane. Like, I'm the last person in the world that should either A, be passionate about the food or be any good at it, because I hated food basically my entire existence up to that point. Now, granted, it was, 16 years of life. And so anyway, when I thought about that, I was like, it scared the you know what out of me to sit there and say, man, I'm going to meet God. And he gave me all these talents, and this is what I did with it. So that really started a very long and grueling. I was thinking about this back when we were talking about spanking, because I know that's lots of people are all over the fence on that and whatever. All I will say is anybody, and I think this is a fair assessment, I get myself in trouble, but I don't know anybody who has a relationship with the Lord where the Lord has not spanked them. And I have definitely been spanked where the Lord's like, okay, and it's all out of love. Like, you're going down a bad path. You're going to feel the pain. The big conversion for me is, like I said earlier, I'm not sure when, of converting from, what I'm going to do to now spending the vast majority of my time saying, who's going to do this? And really going from a player and to a coach. And now I feel like more of like a general manager of a baseball team, where you're looking through the minors, you're looking through your organization, who's going to play third base next. And, is there anybody on the market that we can get? And that, for me to do that, I've got to release a lot of things to my team and delegate, which hasn't always been the easiest thing for me to do, per se.
I think if any industry got hit the hardest here in the last 18 months was for sure your industry, the restaurant industry. How did you keep your head in the game? I mean, for sure you had rough days. How did you continue to go back to God, keep your head up, lead your team, lead your family during that?
What I did was I did a 30-day kind of prayer journey where I just sat with the Lord in the morning and just said, what are we supposed to do? And again, I don't like to take a whole lot of credit for the decisions that we made, because this goes back to why I ultimately became a Christian, was that I realized these weren't my thoughts, right? Like, these, I guess I'll take credit for being obedient to them and listening, but I'm wearing this hat right now from Domo that got launched in COVID that, saved 1 million jobs and was a huge, but that was like that. I just came to it. Now, let me tell you, I will take a measure of credit for the amount of work that went into it, because I said, God has a sense of humor. Anybody that knows me, it's a minor miracle I'm even on this call right now and using technology. I am the most technologically inept human being you've ever met. But, it just sat there and said, I think for one, the beginning part of James, right? You go to that, it's consider this joy, right? And the one thing about, yes, we got hit is, there are a few industries that got hit harder than ours. And I said this to my peers to try to get them pumped up early on. I remember saying this. I'm like, look, guys, here's the deal. Yeah, the crap hit the storm, but let me tell you, the storm came for a bunch of we are the business version of Navy SEALs. Okay. Like, if anybody knows how to take a shit storm and turn it around, it's guys in the restaurant business. I mean, this is a brutal business. So from my perspective, I felt like I'd been somewhat groomed for this moment my entire career, because every night is chaotic and crazy and you're trying to mitigate challenges. Now, this was a bigger challenge. It was unique, but on the drive down, I was talking to my team and I just told my team, I said, look, two things I said a lot. One was, I don't know where, but somewhere in the midst of this, there's going to be opportunity. And we are clearly on a sinking ship. So we need, and I'm just going to tell you, whoever gets off this sinking ship, jumps into the water, swims the fastest to a lifeboat, gets in the lifeboat, rows the fastest, and gets to land the soonest is going to win. A great line from Vijay Singh when they asked him, do you get upset when it rains on you in a tournament? If you don't know, Vijay Singh's a golfer, people are listening, and then they said, Vijay, you get upset when it rains on you in a tournament. He goes, only if it's only raining on me. And that's kind of how I felt. And I told my team that, like, look, this is happening to everybody. And I just believed in our team. I believed that we would work harder. We would run faster than the vast majority of people, and we would just get after it. And, the good news is COVID sucks, but people still had to eat, right? And the one thing I heard is we started getting into it. I didn't hear anybody sit there and claim that they were losing weight during COVID. So I said, look, they're consuming calories. They're just not consuming it at our house. So we better figure out how to feed them in theirs.
Man, thanks for sharing that. And I love your humility that you had in the whole process. But just sharing some of those pieces that how you led your team and even led yourself. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is there have been a couple times in my career where you didn't know, you may be going down, right? There was no question. And one of them was when we were building Boca and Soto. I was like, this may not work. And at one point we fired all the designers and everything. I brought my COO in the time and I said, you're going to design this restaurant. We're going to design it piece by piece ourselves. And it was basically just this mindset of if we're going to go down, we're going to go down swinging, and we'll just give it our best effort and see what happens. So there wasn't, I don't know. A lot of people sit there and talk about I never thought I'd fail. And, I had this sense that I was just, I'm never going to fail. I'm like, no. It's kind of like somebody said, going into battle, if you're not nervous, you're an idiot, right? If you're not, so yes, you should be nervous, right? But at the same time, you need to take that energy and sit there and say, well, look, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging.
Absolutely. Your comment about being nervous, I remember a quote Michael Jordan had about, they asked, do you get nervous for games? He said, absolutely, I still do. Because if I didn't, it means I don't care anymore.
If you're not nervous, if you're not scared, then it doesn't have your full attention, right? I don't know anybody that is in a storm that's sitting here besides Jesus taking a nap.
David, this was fantastic. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you or to experience the blowing people away?
Just come to our restaurants. I don't know. Come check us out.
Come check it out.
Boca,
awesome.
Soto, Nada, whatever.
Thank you very, very much for your time. I appreciate it greatly.
My pleasure anytime.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at corymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.